Studio. We are continuing our discussion with Dr. Neeja Sharma on development and growth. Dr. Sharma,
I would like to now start with the next topic, which is called developmental tasks. As you see, the word development again comes back. We've added the word tasks because a task is not necessarily work in this case. Uh, these are behaviors that children are expected to show at different points in their development डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द स्टेज एंड देयर कल्चरल एक्सपेक्टेशंस, यानी कि वो जिस अवस्था में हैं, जिस आयु में हैं, उस हिसाब से उनका बिहेवियर होना चाहिए. कुछ उदाहरण मैं देती हूँ. जैसे न्यूबॉर्न है, जो शिशु है, नवजात शिशु है, हम जानते हैं कि अधिकतर उस बच्चे को सोना चाहिए. 18 से 20-22 घंटे इस समय बच्चा सो सकता है. पर ये टास्क इसलिए है क्योंकि ये उसको कुछ सुलाया नहीं जाता है. ये ऐसा नहीं कि वो सोना चाहता है, उसकी मर्जी है. ये उसके उस स्टेज की रिक्वायरमेंट है, क्योंकि यदि वो बच्चा उतना नहीं सोएगा तो उसकी डेवलपमेंट में कुछ प्रॉब्लम आ सकती है. यानी कि जो बच्चा इस समय सो नहीं पाता है, उसमें अवश्य किसी प्रकार की कोई कमी है, कुछ तकलीफ है. तो अगर माँ बार बार कहती है कि ये बच्चा सोता नहीं है, सारे दिन में मान लीजिए 1 महीने का बच्चा है और वो 8 घंटे से ज़्यादा सो नहीं पाता है, तो हमें ये अलर्ट होना चाहिए कि शायद कोई बात है. आमतौर पे जो ऑटिस्टिक बच्चे हैं उनकी मदर्स ये शिकायत करती हैं कि मेरा बच्चा अधिकतर नहीं सो पाता है. वो इसलिए बिकॉज उसकी जो कंडीशन ऑटिज़म की है, उस वजह से उसमें ये शक्ति नहीं है सोने की. या बच्चे की तबीयत ख़राब हो जाती है थोड़ी देर के लिए, मान लीजिए पेट खराब हो गया, उस समय बच्चा नहीं सो पाता है, तो सो पाना ही एक तरह का एक टास्क बन जाता है. तो बच्चा सो रहा है, हम शांत हैं, सब कुछ ठीक ठाक है. इसी तरह से बच्चा जब 6 महीने का होता है, एट 6 months, द चाइल्ड शुड बी एबल टू रिकग्नाइज हर मदर. वाई नॉट? If another woman walks into the room, the child should get very cautious. If that woman wants to pick her up, the child should begin to cry because that's not my mother. So it is really for the survival of the child that it is important for a young child to know the difference between the mother and people who are not mothers. But if it's a grandmother who also plays with the child, if it's an aunt who also plays with the child, then there is no problem. Then if a child does not recognize her mother at 6 months, there is a reason to worry. An example of another kind is at 4 years, let's say, we know that children can eat their own food themselves. They can use their hands, they can use a spoon, they can use anything else. When they are hungry, they can have their food, whether it's a rice, whether it's chapati, whether it's anything else. But we know that sometimes we don't let them eat on their own because they will spoil their clothes, or we think the child is too small because we have not realized that the child is able to eat, and there's a struggle between the child and the mother because the child wants to eat and the mother doesn't let the child eat. But it is a necessary task for the child to be able to eat at least some things on her own, because that is going to lead to doing many things on her own, not just eating food. The child will try to have a bath herself, the child will try to put on her own clothes, the child will say, I will do certain things in the house. When the mother says, get me a glass of water, the child will try to do that. So it also is necessary to help the child to grow, to let the child do some things at that young an age. Then when the child becomes 10, which is 6 years later, the child should be able to play with friends, with people outside the home. In fact, children who do not play, it's a very serious flaw. We have to find out why the child cannot play. Children who always have fights with their peers, we must look into it, why that's happening. A child who says, I don't want to go out and play, there is a reason. We must find out what it is. If it's for 1 day, 2 days, but if the child never wants to play, obviously there's an issue there and we have to look into it. It's a task that must take place. At 16 years, another 6 years later, the child is now an adolescent. किशोरावस्था में बच्चे को हर एक काम पूरा करने की आदत होनी चाहिए, चाहे वो स्कूल का काम है, चाहे उसको घर से दिया गया काम है. और इसलिए हम एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं कि इस आयु तक he should not have to be forced to do things which he or she is capable of doing. So therefore, from newborn to 6 months to 16 years, there is such a leap, and these tasks, I gave you only one or two examples at each stage. There are several tasks which are developmentally appropriate, which help for people, for parents to understand, yes, my child is growing okay, and for practitioners, for specialists, for students of child development to know, yes, these things help us understand that's how development takes place. The only thing is that in different cultures, sometimes the prescribed task may be different. For instance, in some places, children must learn to eat with their hands. It is essential. And in some places, they will say, never eat with your hands. So that is not what the child has to, there is nothing wrong if the child is unable to eat with a fork and a knife if the child hasn't learnt it. And it is possible for a child who eats with only a spoon and a fork and a knife will not know how to use hands to eat rice because he is not used to it. You wear different kinds of clothes in different places. You wear different kind of footwear in different places. But in every culture, they will know that the child must be able to do this by this age. See, in our own country, we know girls who are at 7 and 8 capable of cooking, and in another place where they are not even allowed to touch the gas or the electric gadget because they'll tell the child you are too small. So while the child is capable of a task, but the expectation is that the child doesn't have to learn the task. So while certain tasks are developmentally appropriate and must be acquired, but socio-cultural environment will always prescribe the exact task that has to be done. So even when they are capable of doing it, we don't let them do it. Like crossing a road. All the families that live near the roadside, their children are running across the road and back all the time and might have an accident, but generally they do not have accidents. But I don't think I will be able to allow my child to cross the road at 6 years of age. So while the child is capable of the task, we don't let the child perform those tasks. So at the end, I would say a child with disability may not be able to perform many of these tasks, the examples of which I have given, as compared to a typically growing child, and sometimes that itself is an indicator of the fact that the child is at risk or the child may have a disability. And knowing about developmental tasks is a good way of understanding that. You might feel that these are also milestones. See, milestones are much more universal, much more across all places, all cultures, but tasks may be specific to where you live.
I see.
And therefore, some tasks are not performed in some places and some tasks are performed in other places. That is the difference that we find, and sometimes they are used interchangeably also.
This actually this particular aspect that you mentioned, ये जो हमारे देश में अभी जो चाइल्ड लेबर की बात हो रही है, इसमें एक मायना रखता है, because we have situations where children are doing tasks, as you say, which
they should not
be doing.
So they have the energy and they somehow develop the ability to do it, but it is inappropriate because developmentally they should not be, say, doing fine embroidery. They should not be picking up very heavy weight because it retards their growth and development. It interferes with their normal development. See, if they do those things, they are not playing, they are not going to school. So because of these things, while up to adolescence they should be able to play freely in the way they want to play. and when we make them do things which adults should be doing, we actually prevent them from playing. They are bending, their eyes are focusing too hard at things which they are not ready for, and basically they have not done it out of choice, they have been compelled to do it. So
yes.
this debate of how much of it is forced and how much is something that they want to do is always there, because they want to earn.
Yes.
See, children who work at dhabas,
Yes.
you know, they need to earn money for their families, but if their families had the money, they didn't have to work at dhabas. So it's both ways. So while the boy can make very good tea at the dhaba, he can serve everybody food, he can maybe even make chapatis, but developmentally he ought to be playing he ought to be going to school, he ought to be learning his 3 hours, and he ought to be learning to become a full human being. And you have actually arrested the child's development. You know, physically he may look all right, he may look like somebody who can do it. You know, it's a very common practice, I think all of us admit, that we employ small boys and girls in our homes as servants.
Yes.
And we hide them from public.
Those, yeah,
but below 14 you are not supposed to do that. It is because you will make that child work the whole day and maybe give him a few minutes or half an hour to go out and play. But our own child will be allowed to play 5 to 8 hours a day. So you are arresting the child's development. You are actually making that child into a miniature adult very early in life. And therefore certain developmentally appropriate tasks, even play is a task, developmentally appropriate task. That's why I said the word behavior and not necessarily a job to be done.
Okay, yes.
So the child must go through it, because in play, how much they learn through play, they never learn in the classroom. That's very important. So what the teacher teaches in the class is negotiated outside in the playground by the children. And so I would just say that this is an important aspect of development of children.
If a child has a behavior, as you say, that is not acceptable,
yeah,
to the teacher or to other children, or perhaps in the family,
yes,
also,
yes,
is it a deviation, is it a delay, what would you how would you?
Yes, I was coming to our next point of, sorry, I've gone ahead. I think here the last point in our talk today is developmental deviations.
I see.
And the word deviation is useful to have in one's vocabulary. It is important to know what deviation is, but it is not something that is abnormal. So deviation means away from the norm. Norm is what everybody does, and deviation is away from that, different from typical or typical developmental change which is expected of a child of that age. As an example, let me just say, we've been doing these examples earlier also. By the time the child reaches 8 or 9 months, the child is able to sit. But here's a child who's become 10 months, 11 months, 12 months, has crossed 1 year and is not able to sit also. This would be called as deviation. So let's take notice of that. Let's do something about it, because the child's development is now away from the norm, different.
Okay.
But and because deviation is just more than a difference. If it was a difference, then as far as sitting is concerned, the child would have done it by 12 months. The difference would be one child starts at 6 months, another one at 7, another one at 8 months and 9 months. Okay, when it's gone up to 1 year and beyond, it is more than a difference, it is a deviation.
Okay.
And in certain situations, we'd call it's abnormal. Abnormal not in a negative sense. Abnormal means let's take note of it and let's do something about it. If I am somebody who is in charge for taking intervention action, let me take it now. Okay, because for me, but I will not tell a parent your child is abnormal. So that's why I put the word abnormality in quotes, that we will only use it for our own understanding instead of giving the parent a scare that your child is abnormal, because I think parents really get very highly affected by certain terms.
Yes, that's so true.
So we would just say, well, there is something that we need to do because this child has got delayed. Oh no, we're not coming to the end yet. I need to go back to this. Is it possible to come back to
which slide do you want to come to?
I was on deviation. There was a second slide of deviation.
Can you come down, little lower down?
Yeah, here.
Yes, further down.
And I can click on that one.
Yes, this one, G. Double click and click that. Yes.
Okay, the second slide on deviation, I would like to say that deviation can occur in all areas of development. Go back to the same areas that we did earlier, the domains of development. Physical, example for physical is the child can be born with very low birth weight, which in our country it is below 2.5 kilos. So, if it's, let's say 2.45, it's not so bad, but if it's 2 kilos or 1.5 kilos, it would be inappropriate. It would be a deviation. Motor development, the child hasn't started walking even by 2.5 years of age. Yes, I am very concerned the child is not walking, that's a deviation. Cognitive development, the child has become 6 years of age, but is not able to pay attention to any tasks for more than 10 minutes. By 6 years, children who are going to school have to sit for a classroom period is about 25 minutes to 30 minutes. So, the child is not even paying attention for 10 minutes. Yes, it's a deviation. Language development, 8 years the child has become. The child is not able to communicate by speaking simple needs that the child has, like I would like to do this, I cannot eat this, I am hungry now, I want to have a bath, I want to play. The child, by 8 years, children are talking 20 to the dozen. If the child is not able to communicate, yes, it's a deviation. Similarly, a child who becomes 12 years in the social emotional area and has no friends, it definitely is a deviation, because you are a friend to somebody and somebody is a friend to you because you know how to get along. And friendships are, in the previous slide, I would say developmental task, and it hasn't been achieved by the child, so we have to take action. Is the child too aggressive? Is the child too shy? If there is no disability, or if the child has a disability due to which other children don't want to be friends with this child. So, do we do something about it? Yes, we need to take action even in the socio-emotional area. So, if any of the listeners would like to ask a question in the area of deviation or abnormality, I'd be very happy to answer, because we all use the word abnormal very happily. In fact,
yes, is it correct to use a word like abnormal? Actually, this is something.
It can be used for medical purposes. It can be used by special educators for their own use. It depends on who we are referring to. If we are talking amongst each other, we are under training, we can use. But disability is not abnormality. Okay,
yes,
disability is disability. It is a different kind of ability, and most people that we meet think being disabled is being abnormal. So that is something which is inappropriate. Yet sometimes we have to say, I think this child is has a very strange way of doing something. Okay, is that normal or abnormal? So when I compare it with being normal and abnormal for understanding for my own academic purposes, it is okay. But who am I sharing this word with is very,
what
very
is important.
What is
so important? Actually, this
especially
is
talking to parents about
yes. Parents and other people at large. This
yes.
is actually a very critical area, because it's this whole approach of the professional and the
yes.
risk of labeling a child as abnormal and different, and in the process harming the child's prospects and within the family and in its own social setting, for instance. This is very, very critical.
Because it takes away the acceptance of diversity.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
we would like to promote the idea of diversity, of difference, and difference is a little less than deviation and abnormality is a kind of deviation, but yet it is not the same thing, because we find in our vocabulary what we call another person influences how we deal with that person.
Yes.
And therefore it is important to use all these words very carefully.
Absolutely.
If you, in fact, you must have noticed in your classes, your educators may have told you that we don't say disabled child, we say a child with disability, a child with autism, a child with mental retardation, because we want to respect the child.
Yes.
And say, well, with disability, some children have a condition which actually goes away. You know, for instance, some of the behavior problems are there. We don't say a disturbed child. We would like to say a child with an emotional disorder, a child with a behavior disorder. That means the disorder might go away one day when we work with the child. So the child is still in place.
Yes, absolutely. This is very important because of this issue of people first, terminology, where we have to consciously remember to refer to the person first or the child first. So we say person with disability, we say people with disabilities, we say children with disabilities or children with special needs or whatever, but the word that comes first has to be the child or the person in question, and that in that we, as you said, rightly said, respect their dignity and their diversity and the difference, and that in fact should be an underlying element in our philosophy, in our way of working with in this sector. It's very important to remember this. And Dr. Sharma, I just wanted to ask you to take a little time to share some experiences from your work at the nursery school in that you run at Lady Irwin College, and describe how this academic this knowledge about development and growth and and how the child develops, how these normal so-called markers when we study them, how it's actually affected your work, particularly in the context of including children with disabilities in your nursery school.
Yes, actually, as I said, the preschool itself is more than 50 years old, and our work with children with special needs is about 27 years old. How it happened was that we would always admit children without ever testing them, without giving them an interview, or as the practice is they interview the parents. They just are admitted based on a form that the parents fill up, and we take the child. So as a result, there was no discrimination between one kind of child or another kind of child, intelligent child or not so intelligent child. So some children who had some disability became part of us, and the option was that our teacher said, this child is different from others. I don't know how to work with this child because he doesn't understand what I'm saying, or he runs away from the class, or he starts crying. So the attempt was to understand the child and to try and learn to work with the child, rather than say take the child away because we think the child doesn't understand our way of working. So with that, I think we learned to accept every child that came to us. Gradually the school got the reputation that here is a place where you can admit your child with disability and they won't turn the child away. So then gradually we developed a policy that we will admit a certain number of children with special needs by knowing what disability they have, if the parents know it. If there is a diagnosis, even if there is no diagnosis, we'll take the child and find out how we can work with the child. So the policy immediately was inclusive. Learn to work with the child, whatever the way the child is. Now we never had any separate special education rooms, so they were always inclusive actually.
Okay.
Then gradually we realized that our teachers do not have special education skills, so we started employing one special educator, because there were very few available 20 years ago.
Yeah,
And some of them were only actually child development graduates still had training, because we were giving them training at Lady Urban College. So we started taking some children and giving them individual attention with special educators, preparing IEPs, etc. with them, so that they get the best from us, and there was no discrimination between one disability and another. A child with special needs, any disability, sometimes the parents didn't even know what the disability was. The child, many children came who were actually lying down. They couldn't even sit. Certain children with cerebral palsy could not even sit up.
Yes.
But the parents had special chairs on which they could recline, and they could be part of the classroom, watching other children play, watching other children learn. But being part of that, because there's a lot of music, a lot of storytelling, a lot of playing around, indoor, outdoor. And gradually from that we've come to where we have, out of about 170 preschool children, we have about 40 children with different disabilities in the preschool at any time, of which at least 10 have autism.
I see. That's quite remarkable.
Yes,
actually.
and there are those with intellectual disability. A lot of them partially hearing impairment. We have many of them visual impairment. Mostly children with blindness do not come to us, because there are schools for children with blindness in Delhi, and the children with different kinds of physical abilities and disabilities. And we take pride in the fact that many of them have completed the preschool education, because they are allowed to be with us for up to 4 years. Other children leave after 1 or 2 years.
Okay.
They can be with us till the age of 7, because they enter late. They can't enter at 3, most of them. So they may enter at 4 or 5, and they can be with us till 7 or 8, and we help them to get into other programs if they are capable of inclusive education, and the schools
mainstream schooling.
Yeah,
yes.
the schools are willing to admit them. We help them to get into schools which are mainstreaming them. So we have a very good experience of working with children with, because all our students who are doing BSc have to take observations of these children. At the master's level, they actually learn to work with them. They do case studies, they home visits, they interview the parents at length, and they prepare a full case study like a thesis of children with special needs. We undertake master's dissertations and doctoral dissertations in the area of special needs, so that the two programs, the academic program and the early childhood program, are very much interdependent on each other for success. They are part of each other. One cannot do without the other.
Yeah, this is a very happy augury actually, because we are at RCI also looking for ways of including components on needs of children with disabilities into regular mainstream B.Ed programs and so on and so forth as well. So this is a good precedence for us to cite and take this work forward.
We have started a B.Ed in special education at the college, specializing in mental retardation. So the first batch is doing its B.Ed in special education. Specialization is in mental retardation. It's an RCI
approved program.
Approved. It's the RCI course that's running. The degree will be given by the University of Delhi.
Okay, that's really wonderful.
So we will hope to have 20 people available to be special educators.
Yes, that will be wonderful indeed.
Yeah.
There was one question that I was, had in mind. How important do you think it is for a child with disability to attend a preschool or an Anganwadi center, or any such institutionalized setup where preschool education is imparted? How critical or how important it is for normal children, and then particularly for children with disabilities?
I would say this is part of the early intervention strategy. I mean, nothing better than that, because even if parents are given some training in early intervention, going to a preschool with their other children is going to be the best thing that can happen to the child. And younger children are so much more tolerant of other children, even if they have disabilities, than when they are grown up.
Yes.
So our experience is that they grow much, much faster, in a sense. They learn many more things, and they learn many normal behaviors, which they learn by looking at each other, and they learn every day. They learn new words. That I find autistic children pick up so much language, because all our autistic children are mainstream. They're not in separate.
They're not in separate groups, or
they are all in a regular classroom, and we find that they pick up so many appropriate behaviors, socially appropriate behaviors, socially appropriate language, and therefore I think what Vygotsky said about the zone of proximal development, all children have the ability to rise up if there's a challenge to them. So mainstream classes are more challenging than the only special education classes in many ways, and therefore sending the child to a program that accepts the child is going to be, I think, an excellent approach in early intervention as far as education is concerned.
Okay. There is this other matter that is a cause for some concern for people who are advocating for inclusive education, and in the country today we have the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan program, for instance. There is a tendency for somebody else to decide who is ready, which child is ready to go to a mainstream school, for instance, who is more severely disabled, in this context, what sort of experiences have you had? Because we find that, for instance, children with cerebral palsy are promptly, or children with mental retardation are presumed to be ineducable, and I mean, except for this specific categorization, but by and large within the mainstream system they presume that they cannot deal with such children, and only the apparently cognitively able and unimpaired children are taken into mainstream schooling.
I would say it depends on the openness of the school. I have seen in Delhi, at least, there are schools that are taking both categories of children that you're mentioning, because you have to work harder with them, and they are not going to follow instructions just because you say something to them. So the inclusive policy is this, that we adapt ourselves, the educators, the education system adapts to the child, but otherwise we keep expecting the child to adapt to the system. So these two categories of children may take longer to adapt. The autistic children may
have different ways of adapting.
Yes, they adapt different, because we have a certain structure and say we don't fit into that.
Yes,
they were never originally meant to be inclusive schools. Now we are moving towards that because of the philosophy, because of the pressure, and because of a certain status attached to if you're inclusive. Now it's become a fashion.
So that's a nice thing to have.
But I think it's a good fashion.
Yes, absolutely. We must encourage this fashion.
So, but I find that the educators as well as the sensitive educators and schools are wanting to get into this field, but they don't know how. They want to learn. They want to know, is it going to be impossible? Can somebody teach us? Can you give us educators? They also do not have people who can help them out immediately. But some are willing to experiment in a nice way. Some make a few mistakes and therefore learn, and some say, only when I am ready I'll take the child. You'll never be ready.
Yes, if you keep waiting to be ready, you'll...
Yeah, it's like saying, I will not step into the water unless I learn swimming. How will you learn swimming if you don't step into the water?
Absolutely.
So you have to do one thing at a time, but help your teachers to get the training, help your teachers to become aware, help your teachers to become open, and I think we have to understand their real life difficulties also. You can't have a class of 50 and 60 and push 5 children with special needs over there who have 5 different disabilities, isn't it? If that attempt is made, then sometimes the child is actually at a disadvantage.
Yes, that is a concern, but
it's
yes. So with the backup of appropriate resources and appropriate support that the child, that the school mainstream education system needs, we can. And there's this other view also that inclusive education is really good education, isn't it? I mean, it's education, the inputs that go into, or rather I would go further to say that special education is really basically good quality education.
It's good for all children.
Yes, it's good
if
for all.
If we use the methods that are employed in special education, they're good for all children. In fact, we were saying the other day that make an IEP for every child, but only for children with special needs. But then if we have an IEP in our head also, it's very good. It doesn't have to be on paper.
Exactly.
And special educators become very good at making IEPs in their head, but they're still required to make it on paper. So every child is special, and every child must be addressed in the way that the child would learn the best. So while that philosophy is good, I know that you can take a group of 10, 20 children and give them one instruction. With a child who takes longer to understand, you give them a little more time.
Little more, exactly.
Little
more
time.
input and more support.
And therefore that the child will also learn. So if we are, I mean, when we have a patient with a medical problem, we are so much more patient with them. We are much more understanding of them, you know, because somehow the medical field has taken people there. Okay, if there's a member of the family who others are told has a heart condition, look after the person's meals, look after the person's health. We are very careful.
Yes.
But when a person has special needs like let's say intellectual disability, we are not that ready. Because it doesn't look sick,
and we're not that that caring or conscious of their special needs.
So it's just that in our country we've come into this kind of later, and therefore I think it will take us time to get used to it, to convince ourselves and not to see it as a burden. While it happened with let's say girl child's education, we're much more open, we talk much more freely about it. We feel very empowered to talk about it. But I think 25 years ago it wasn't so easy to do many things that we are able to do now. So I'm very hopeful. The changes are very positive, and I meet people who are much more, families are much more willing to talk about it. For instance, all my students, when they get a full year course on special needs children, their families are fully educated by the end of that 1 year. Every single member is educated about it because they talk about it.
And that's one process of spreading the awareness. We have come to the close of today's session, and I'd like to thank you, Dr. Sharma, for sparing the time to come and be with us today and in engaging with all the students who are listening from all our DRS centers, answering our questions and underscoring this issue of knowing the whole aspect about development, normal development, and how a child grows and develops, and being able to draw the connection with children with disabilities whom we are primarily focusing on, and understanding what is the differences, deviations and so on and so forth. Thank you very much, and I'd like to request our viewers also to keep watching and keep calling in with their questions and asking for clarifications as they wish, and giving us feedback from time to time, either through the phone calls, or you can contact us at the RCI addresses whenever you wish. It will be maybe useful for viewers to know that now we are taking a block of 5 sessions. Today was the first of these 5 sessions, all relating to child development and child psychology and so on and so forth, and the whole process of learning. So I hope you find this of interest and continue to watch the programs. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And thank you.